You were asking something, sir?
In the 40s, was there as much concern for the ratings as there is now?
Oh, you bet there was. Good Godfrey, Nielsen and Hooper and Nielsen. That was before, I think, Crosley, or maybe not. But it certainly was. There was concern. And as a matter of fact, my deceased husband did those Websters, and it was a well-known fact that those Websters beat every week Ozzie and Harriet. First Nighter ran some of the top comedies straight into another evening when they were on Friday evenings. No one could top them, and no one could top those Websters.
At 10 p.m. Eastern Time, as families put their young children to bed, ABC broadcast Mr. President from its Los Angeles KECA affiliate, starring Edward Arnold and Betty Lou Gerson.
Mr. President, starring Edward Arnold. The American Broadcasting Company and its affiliated stations present Mr. President. Mr. President, at home in the White House, the elected leader of our country, our fellow citizen and neighbor. These are little-known stories of the men who've lived in the White House, dramatic, exciting events in their lives that you and I so rarely hear.
Mr. President first signed on June 26, 1947. Producers picked Arnold to star because his voice had the aggressiveness of Teddy Roosevelt, the humility of Abraham Lincoln, and the tenacity of Andrew Jackson.
Now, Edward Arnold as Mr. President. Let's visit him in the White House.
Listeners were challenged to guess the president's identity before it was revealed at the end. Fittingly, the 1947 Thanksgiving episode featured a tale from the life of George Washington.
The president's study.
Good evening. Sit down, won't you? You know, the problem of being peacemaker in an argument is not an easy one, particularly when you have two brilliant individuals involved, each firmly believing that he is right. You have to see both sides, but you can't take either side. And still you have to keep them together, as I tried to do in tonight's story. Later on, of course, I'll tell you which president these incidents really happened to. But meanwhile, you may be able to guess. The personal controversy between Ed Taylor and Tom Faraday had been going on for some time. But one morning it came right out in the open at a meeting of my cabinet. All right, gentlemen, we're ready for the report of the Secretary of State. Mr. Faraday, please.
Mr. President, the newly appointed minister, Charles Montreux, will soon be arriving in this country. I don't know him personally, but I've heard something of his reputation. He'll be very much in sympathy with the ideals of your administration, Mr. President, and with the ideals of our country.
A question, Mr. Faraday.
Yes, Mr. Taylor?
It's not important whether Montreux is sympathetic with us or not. I'd like to know if we're apt to be sympathetic with him. I see a difference.
What do you mean, Ed?
France has just been through a revolution and civil war, and her new government is at war with England. The majority of Americans hope to see England win that war.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Taylor. The overwhelming majority of Americans are pro-French in sympathy, and they should be. The new French government is founded on the same liberal ideas as ours. Besides, France is an ally of ours by treaty.
Mr. President.
Yes, Ed.
I wish to make a motion for the Cabinet's consideration. I move that this government suspend the treaty with France.
Mr. President, we can't do that.
Please, gentlemen, please. Go on, Ed.
I move that this government suspend the treaty with France. We signed it with the previous government of France. That government no longer exists. We can no longer be bound by the treaty.
Good heavens, Mr. Taylor. The treaty is not between our government and their government. It's between our people and the French people. Your motion is dishonest and cowardly.
Calling me names won't change the facts, Faraday. Any mark of favor from us to France will only put us in danger of war with England. I say we should not even receive this new French minister.
Impossible.
Faraday, you're not even listening to my arguments. You're opposing me purely for the sake of opposing.
Gentlemen.
But, Mr. President,
Ed, please.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Gentlemen, we face one big question. Is our treaty with France still binding? Whatever we decide, there's the plain risk of war, and that's the last thing we want. Meanwhile, I want all of you to forget your personal feelings and ask yourselves only what's best for our country. Tom, when is Montreux due to arrive?
In about 2 weeks, sir. But I want to warn this meeting. We'll solve nothing by following advice such as Taylor's been urging. I am Secretary of State, and if I'm to be hampered and obstructed by the Secretary of Treasury, my advice ignored, I can no longer remain in this cabinet.
Oh, Tom, please now.
Mr. President, I don't know why you let those two men cause you so much trouble.
Oh, I don't suppose they realize it.
You're more important than Mr. Taylor and Mr. Faraday and the whole cabinet and Congress.
Now, just a minute, Miss Sarah. I'm not more important. My job is.
All right, your job then. But if they can't get together, you'll have to choose between them.
I need them both, Miss Sarah. I know their points of view clash. Taylor favors the notion of an aristocratic monarchy. Faraday is a democratic Republican. One believes in authority, and the other has faith in the people.
And neither is willing to give up his ideas in favor of the other.
Miss Sarah, in times like these, they will have to. England and France are at war. Other nations may join at any moment. We may be involved. We've got to have national unity.
It can't depend on only two men.
It does. I've got to bring them together, Miss Sarah. I've got to talk to them separately. Now, first send me, send for Tom Faraday, then get me Ed Taylor. Sit down, Tom. I've asked you to come here because of what happened at the cabinet meeting this morning.
I would have said more, Mr. President, but I was afraid of losing my temper entirely. You heard Taylor in the meeting. Of all the short-sighted, dangerous, cold-blooded suggestions I ever heard...
Listen,
I have listened to him, sir, for over 3 years. I've seen him twist you around his little finger. Anything to block me.
Well, I have something to say about that, Tom.
Then I've got to ask you, sir. Either demand his resignation from the cabinet or let me resign.
Sour grapes, Tom?
Well, frankly, it isn't all on account of Ed Taylor. I want to go home, have some time with my family. I'm 50 years old, Mr. President. I've been in government service for most of the last 20. I've got grown daughters. I want to know them better before it's too late.
I'd like to go home, too, Tom. But I can't.
Of course, but if I'm no longer in the cabinet, sir, things will go much more smoothly. Let Taylor have his way.
I will not. And I won't let you have your way either. I want you to promise to cooperate with Ed Taylor.
I don't see what good can come of it.
Tom, both you and Ed have a great deal to give your country. You've proven it already. You'll go on proving it in the years ahead. I'm not going to let either of you fail in your duty. You belong in the cabinet, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep you both in it.
Mr. President, I don't like Taylor. I don't agree with anything he says or does.
Well, you can compromise. You've got to.
Oh, yes, we can compromise on small points. But when it comes to matters of principle, I'm sorry. I can't compromise. And let me say this about Taylor. I don't think he can either.
Well, what about my principles?
What?
Well, never mind. Do I have your promise? I want you both in the cabinet, almost at any cost. At least until we solve the French question.
Yes, Mr. President. I'll do my best.
Good. Now about the French treaty and Montreux.
Mr. President, you can see how impossible it is to suspend the treaty.
So far, I agree with you. But suppose Montreux insists we join France in her war against England.
Well, I don't know, sir.
It seems to me it depends largely on what orders Montreux's got from his government in Paris. And it depends on public opinion here, doesn't it?
Well, that means it depends on Montreux.
Exactly. So let's not try to decide everything now. Let's wait for Montreux to arrive in this country. Meanwhile, Tom, you won't forget your promise.
I'll try not to, sir.
I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Very grateful.
You know, radio is a wonderful medium. It's a shame that radio drama is what I'm speaking of. It's a shame that it's gone. It did something for actors, and I have said this many times, that was never been done before or since in all of history. For the journeyman actor, the lay actor, it made him an upstanding, home-owning, stay-in-one-place, family-raising, tax-paying, bill-paying. It did all these things for actors who were not big stars. And you had a steady salary, and you became famous, and people loved you, and they became so familiar with your voice. It was a great ID point for me in the theater in New York, and also when I went into pictures in Hollywood.
Remember, a Hallmark card will best express your perfect taste, your thoughtfulness.
The makers
makers of Hallmark greeting cards bring you tonight a dramatic tribute to Thanksgiving, Why Keep Your Heart in Cold Storage, starring Van Heflin.
Opposite Mr. President, live from Hollywood over all CBS stations. Radio Reader's Digest signed on, guest starring Van Heflin. 1947 was a good year for the 38-year-old actor. That summer, he co-starred with Joan Crawford in Possessed and brought Philip Marlowe to radio as a summer replacement for Bob Hope. His latest film, Green Dolphin Street, just hit theaters. It co-starred Lana Turner and was that year's biggest MGM hit.
It's a real pleasure to pause on Thanksgiving Day and think of the many, many blessings we have to be thankful for. And among the greatest blessings we have are our friends and loved ones. So it seems appropriate tonight to talk about one of the ways we keep that love and friendship alive, the sending of Christmas cards. This year, if you want to send cards that are recognized for their beauty and distinction, and by the wonderful way they have of saying what is in your heart, the store that carries Hallmark cards. And now to preside over our program, here is your Hallmark host, Les Tremaine.
Thank you, Tom Shirley, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we bring you a star whose life reads like an adventure story. South America, Mexico, Honolulu, Alaska, the South Seas, the Orient, all have been ports of call for Van Heflin. Then he saw still more of the world during his 3 years in the Air Corps and came back to thrill American movie audiences in such pictures as Till the Clouds Roll By and Possessed. And Van, we're happy to have you with us tonight. You know, we've been told that the sort of movie part you like is something good and something different. Well, we believe our story tonight just fits your prescription.
Yes, it does, Les. Even the title, Why Keep Your Heart in Cold Storage. By the way, that advice might very well lead to Hallmark cards.
You're ahead of me, Van. I was going to lead up to the subject of Hallmark and those 3 words that assure folks of getting the best greeting cards.
You don't have to tell me, Les, I know. You turn the card over and look on the back for those 3 identifying words. A Hallmark card.
And those 3 little words, a Hallmark card, tell your friends you cared enough to send the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, the makers of Hallmark greeting cards bring you a wonderful story of one man's Thanksgiving as they present on the Reader's Digest radio edition, Why Keep Your Heart in Cold Storage, starring Van Heflin.
This all happened last November. Last November, I was just out of the Army. And out of work, too. Ever been in that condition? It made me act in a way I never acted before. I got so my eyes avoided people, my shoulders were hunched over. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't smile with more than one side of my face at a time. Not that I tried very hard. What I had in my soul, I had bitterness, that's what. All right, that's the way it was with me. I was hitching rides one day, and when no rides came, I went up to the door of this tiny farmhouse on Highway 63.
Hello, son.
Oh, have you got a room I could sleep in tonight?
Why, certainly, son. Come in.
Wait a minute. I can't pay.
I said come in, son.
Okay.
Sit down.
Thanks.
Are you hungry?
Did you hear me when I said that I didn't have any money?
You hear me when I ask if you were hungry?
No.
Are you?
Yes, but I haven't any money.
Well, there's cheese on the table and bread. And, well, here's a pitcher of milk.
You're a pretty wonderful guy, you know that?
Thanks. Was it Army or Navy?
Army.
Work since you were out?
About 2 days. Odd jobs.
That's strange. Didn't you have a job before you went in the Army?
I didn't go back to it.
That's very interesting.
Interesting?
Yes, if you didn't go back to a job that was waiting for you. This was in your hometown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting that a young fellow like you wouldn't want to go back to his hometown.
Say, I like you all right, mister, but you're pretty curious, aren't you?
Yes, it's my greatest virtue.
Virtue?
Virtue.
I didn't go back home because nobody wanted me back home.
Parents?
Yeah, 2 of them.
And they don't want you?
No.
Girlfriend?
Not anymore.
Well, that's too bad. Now, whose fault was it you broke up?
Oh, it was my fault. I let the Army draft me, didn't I? I went away. I went to all those foreign places for a vacation without her, the Solomons, New Guinea, the Russell Islands. It was my fault.
Jealous, aren't you?
I am not jealous.
My mistake. More milk?
No, thanks. Look, could I see that room that you were going to lend me?
Well, it's right this way. You're tired already.
I slept 3 hours last night in a barn.
Well, here's a room. It's a good bed, I think.
Looks wonderful to me.
I'll leave you. Be sure to sleep well. You'll need your strength tomorrow.
No, for what?
For the job I'm going to get you. Good night.
His name was Green. I didn't know until I met him that people could be the way he was. A combination of village gossip and blooming saint. But that was Green, all right. The village gossip part of him kept on prying into my affairs, and the saint, God bless him, found me a job.
Well, Harold, here's a young man I telephoned you about last night.
Okay, Mr. Green. We can put him to work in the shipping room. We can start tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And look, Mr. Green, I'll never forget this.
Oh, that's all right.
Look, I wonder if you could tell me where I could find a room in town.
Miss Blanchard's is good. You take the 3rd Street on the left.
Now, wait a minute. You won't need all these directions, son, for another week or two.
Well, why not?
You won't be paid for another week or two.
About a week and a half.
Well,
So you better come back to my house.
Well, look, I don't want to bother you, Mr. Green.
It'd bother me terribly to feel you were sleeping in a barn for the next week and a half. So you come on back to my house.
That was the saint part of him. When we got back to the farmhouse, the village gossip took over. Did I say village gossip? He was also something like a cop getting a 3rd degree. I don't know why I took it.
Well, you have a job now.
Yeah.
I suppose you'll be writing home to tell the folks about it.
Who says so?
Where is your hometown?
It doesn't matter.
Did the girl get married?
How do I know what she did?
You know what she did.
Do I?
Of course you do. You're too interested not to have found out. You're too jealous not to torture yourself by finding out.
All right, so I know and so you don't know and so that's the way it's going to stay.
You going to write to her or just your folks about the new job?
I'm not going to write to anybody.
Why not?
I told you, nobody back there's interested in me.
Your parents aren't interested in you.
Look, you seem to be all in a sweat about my personal affairs, and the only reason I'm bothering with your questions is that you've done me a great favor.
I don't mean to pry.
Well, but you are prying, and the worst part of it is that I've said enough to give you the wrong idea, and now I've got to go on and tell you this much more. It's not my parents' fault. They're not unnatural parents. They're not interested in me because I haven't been a good son. That's all.
In what way were you not a good son?
I was a bum.
Before the war, of course.
That's right.
Tried one job after another, I suppose, and gave them all up.
Yeah, that's it.
And your parents didn't like that.
Well, would you like it if you were my parents?
Like it? No. Be interested in you? Yes. Did you write to them during the war?
Some. Never.
Did they write to you?
Yes.
Well, now tell me one thing. Do your parents know where you are now?
They have no idea where I am.
I'll bet I know why you don't tell them. I'll bet it's because if they knew, they'd come around pestering you. Isn't that it?
Oh, what if it is?
It is, that is.
Of course it is. I don't want them bothering their heads about me. What of it?
Nothing of it. Except that if they were really not interested in you, it'd be all right to tell them where you are. They wouldn't bother you at all if they were not interested in you.
But
Well?
You get me all mixed up.
I'm afraid you got yourself all mixed up, son.
I broke away from him and went into the room that he had given me. I tried to think of something else, but I just didn't care about anything except the fact that I was all mixed up. He was right, I was mixed up. After a while, I began to want to talk about it. I went out into the living room. But now, wouldn't you know it, Mr. Green didn't seem to want to talk at all.
I'm writing letters, Jordan.
Oh, sorry. Keep quiet.
Thanksgiving letters.
Yeah?
Well, I'm finishing up this one. I wish you'd read that one there on the table. See if I spelled and punctuated correctly.
Yeah, sure. Huh? Good. Huh. Dear Miss Austin, you may be surprised to hear from an old pupil, but I write to several people each year at Thanksgiving time to let them know how thankful I am for what they did for me. You may have forgotten me, Miss Austin, but I was a student of yours in the 6th grade in 1916. I'm writing to thank you because in that year you got me interested in literature. Every day since I left you, literature has been a delight to me, and I thank you. Yours gratefully, Mark the Great. Hey, look, what is this?
Now, what's the matter? Something misspelled? Something ungrammatical?
No, but what kind of a letter is this?
It's a Thanksgiving letter.
I never heard of Thanksgiving letters.
Well, not many people have. I invented them.
What's the idea of them?
Well, doesn't the letter explain that? They're just for the purpose of giving thanks to people who've done something for you. Oh, what's the matter? You seem to resent the idea.
No, I don't resent it. It's just that it makes me ashamed.
Why?
Well, I never think of things like that.
I don't have a copyright on the idea.
Well, I don't have anybody to write to anyway, so...
Nobody to thank?
No, nobody to thank.
I see. You know, funny thing. Last year I wrote 4 Thanksgiving letters, and all 4 were to relatives. But never before last year had I realized I had anything to thank those relatives for. But I did have something to thank them for. I thank one of them for spanking me once. Could you hand that letter back?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. I think I'll go mail it. Want to come along?
Oh, no, thanks. No, I'll stay here. I've got some things to think about.
Radio Reader's Digest debuted on September 13th, 1942 on CBS. The famed magazine actually didn't sponsor the show. They provided the material. Hallmark Greeting Cards was the sponsor. In 1947, Les Tremaine was the host.
People didn't know my face particularly, but as soon as they heard the voice, they knew who it was. And it was a great tie-in for me. Telephone operators.
Just at random, you pick up the phone and make a call and they say, I know their voice?
Mm-hmm. What was that show you were on? A lot of older ladies, middle-aged ladies or telephone operators, and they know voices. Traveling around the country, you sign your name on a credit card in a gas station or something, and they remember you. And you have friends everywhere. It's beautiful, not only as an entree to a lot of things, but just the fact that there is a warm feeling in the recollections of the things you did and they heard you do. Your imagination created everything.
Our program continues now with the second act of tonight's story, Why Keep Your Heart in Cold Storage, starring Van Heflin.